Dave Harding, Executive Director, Blue Devil Network, and Man About Town, part of the Duke Radio Network. He has won this bell. You have spray painted this sucker Duke blue. What do you recall from those crazy days of youth? And by the way, congratulations once again, new dad.
Thank you. I don't know what's better, introducing another child into the world or winning the victory bell. Both of
yes,
those
you
right
do.
Up there.
A clear sign your wife is not listening, that you would even pretend.
No, definitely the second son and the first, both highlights. But I will say, spray painting the victory bell back in 2012, the first time the Blue Devils won it in quite some time. I think the streak was longer than 5 at the time.
Oh yeah,
for Carolina was something to behold, and is a memory that I will hold on to forever. And then we won my final year at Duke over in Chapel Hill to clinch the Coastal Division. So it's kind of in reverse order in this case, where it's the first ACC game for both of these teams, and you're putting the victory bell on the line. But with the way the playoff is set up and the way that the ACC works right now, each one of these games crucially important if you're looking to get to Charlotte, and you could basically tee up the rest of your season and the conference portion of your season in a great way with a win, not just in bringing home a trophy with the victory bell, but working toward an ACC trophy. So a lot on the line.
Dave Harding is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show, and I am not in any way making a joke here at all about what you just said. There are people who are listening to this, all 8 of them, who went, wait a second, is Dave making like talking about Duke competing for the ACC title? I'm not making an editorial comment. You have seen this team up close. You've seen Malik Murphy and the receiving core. You've seen the defense and tackles for loss and all of that. And it has to start with a win over the Tar Heels tomorrow. But the last game against Middle Tennessee, and I don't know if Middle Tennessee is any good or not. I really don't. That was the first, I thought, start-to-finish performance by the Blue Devils. What have you seen from them? Because the conference schedule is pretty hard, I think. What have you seen from Duke?
Well, I've seen from Duke a group that is buying into the important things early and are treating and have treated the first 4 opponents to their season with great respect. Have they played perfectly? Absolutely not. But they've definitely been prepared for each one of their opponents, and you're seeing a group kind of come together and believe in one another. And it happens to be a team that I believe has a legitimate talent on offense, defense, and in special teams. So it's a group that has a lot in front of them. There's still a lot to be determined, but when I survey what I've seen on tape and in person for what Duke has, and then I look around the conference and see what else is out there, I think there's a legitimate shot at making a run into getting to Charlotte. It's been a wild start to the year. The story is far from written, but when we think about teams maybe outside of Miami and Louisville that are kind of like running in the same pack, I think you have to include Duke in that. And again, I mean, you've got to start somewhere, and this week, tomorrow, is where that journey starts for the Blue Devils. But everything they've put on tape to this point absolutely gives them an absolute chance at least being part of that conversation. They should be. At
Dave Harding Jr. on Twitter, Duke and Carolina coming up tomorrow, starting at 4:00 at Wallace Wade Stadium. It goes without saying, the first order of business is controlling Omarion Hampton. Stopping him is probably not even possible, but controlling him, limiting him is important. How do you see Duke doing that?
I think you've got to get vertical on defense. And when you watch the tape against North Carolina, the teams that have had the better success in limiting Hampton. It is the teams that have been able to get some penetration up front along the offensive line, take away some of his angles. They love to do that little stretch play, get him running toward the sideline so he can pick his gap. And if you take those longer developing runs away and force a decision to be made by Hampton into maybe the waiting arms of a linebacker or a defensive lineman, that's where you can have some success. It's definitely a challenge. I think it's about tackling too. He is so good at getting through first contact, and you have to make sure that you're tackling him low. I can't remember how many times JMU, and I understand it did not turn out the way Carolina fans wanted it to turn out, but Hampton still had his fair share of times just running through defenders that tried to wrap up around him too high. So between the penetration and look, Duke's been living in the backfield. They're one of the best teams in the country at creating havoc and creating TFLs and putting pressure on running backs behind the line of scrimmage. So between that and then making sure you're a sound tackler, that's about all the chance you have in limiting what's going to be an absolutely wildly popular option in the NFL draft coming up next year, and I know he'll have a long career as a running back.
Dave Harding is joining us here from the Duke Radio Network. 4 o'clock kickoff for the Blue Devils and the Tar Heels at Wallace Wade Stadium. When you look at North Carolina, the old cliche is that they're the wounded animal is the most dangerous, blah, blah, blah. But they are wounded because I thought even though they scored 50, they were embarrassed. Mack Brown was embarrassed by 70 points. Does it make the job of Duke that much more difficult, or does it not matter?
I think it does. As a player, I always wanted to be the team and the player that was the one that shed light on a team's weaknesses, and not the one that was having to deal with a team that had just had everything brought to light and had a whole week to fix it. So I think there's a similar feel with this game where, okay, you've got a really good coaching staff in Chapel Hill. They know what their strengths and weaknesses are. They're going to tweak some things and come back out. Maybe, do they go to fundamentals and stick to what they're good at? Are they going to throw something new out there in the attempt of kind of jump-starting a new look and some fresh feel to their team? Who knows? So there's a lot more up in the air as opposed to if this is a team coming in at 4-0 that, although maybe a close win, had beaten JMU. Now I think there's more question marks about what to expect. And also you got to think that, to your point on the wounded animal, this is a group that's angry and ready to come out and prove that they're different than what they showed last week, on top of the fact that this is a rivalry game to begin with. So emotions are high. I think a lot of it comes down to how does Carolina handle that.
Dave Harding is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I talked to Bryn Renner. And by the way, I guess you guys both were in that 2012 game. He played in the 2011 game too. That was a win in Chapel Hill earlier in the season. The one that Duke won, ending that losing streak. Do you remember the play that won it?
I do very well. The 2012 play. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sean Renfrey to Jamison Crowder was with about a minute or something to go in the game, won it. And I'll never forget this rivalry, and it's just truth for many rivalries. The highs have never felt higher, and the lows have never felt lower. And just in the midst of that game, and as a fan, you kind of feel it too. When things are going wrong, it almost feels like it's an insurmountable task to get the ship righted. But then when things are going really well, it's this jovial, nobody can bring us down type feeling. And I absolutely remember that. And I also remember, speaking of Bryn Renner, we scored. We felt like when we were on offense, I remember we felt like we didn't have much time left. But then we scored and had to kick the ball off to Carolina, and they had a chance to run a few plays, and it felt like 2 years were left on the clock.
What I remember is that I couldn't believe that Jamison Crowder held onto the ball.
I know.
Because he was hit hard when he caught that ball.
I thank him for catching and holding on to that ball. And he's turned into a great receiver in the NFL.
Uh-huh.
But that was a heck of a play, a heck of a drive, too, because you remember, Duke was moving the ball, and we had a lead, and then there was this wild play where Carolina fumbles it. Ross Cockrell, defensive back for Duke, is going to jump on the ball, give us the ball back instead, and I forget who the running back was at the time, scooped it up and scored a touchdown to go ahead with not much time left on the clock. I remember just standing on the sideline about to go in that ensuing drive, and Sean Renfrey looks at everybody and goes, we're going to go down the field and score a touchdown. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, right. Like we'll see how this goes. And we did, and got it done. It's what this rivalry is all about. And the past 2 years, no exception. It's just for Duke fans gone the wrong way, but what wild finishes.
Oh, two absolute classic games. Yes. Look, I think there were coaches in the past for Carolina that didn't really look at this game as a rivalry. They won it, but they didn't really look at it. Mack Brown cares about it. How long does it take a Manny Diaz in year one to really care about this game?
I think he cares. I just met with him actually a few minutes before this call, and just in talking to him about the importance of a rivalry and asking him kind of how he's feeling. He definitely says this one feels different. Now his approach to it is not different. His teaching to the team is not different, but call a spade a spade. This game means a lot for the bragging rights, but then also what we were talking about to begin this conversation, Adam, in a team that believes they have a shot in getting to Charlotte, this game matters. And it's a conference game. It's a playoff game, essentially, as you have to win as many of you can to be included in that conversation. So there's a heck of a lot riding on this. And it's this staff's first, step into that pool of what the Duke-Carolina very famous rivalry is like. I think the tension and the difference around campus has been palpable. You can feel it. Mm-hmm. And I think he definitely values the history to this rivalry and is taking it very seriously in terms of making sure he leaves his mark positively on it in year one.
All right, final thing for Dave Harding, Duke Radio play-by-play, color analyst, not play-by. I don't want to, get in the way of Mr. Shoemate here. But aside from Malik Murphy, and I believe he'll have a good game, Duke wins if this guy pops. Who is it? Who's the player?
Yeah, offensively, I think Jordan Moore has to pop, and part of that is in Malik Murphy finding him. But I think the Blue Devils have a chance at going deep and making some of these deep ball shots count that we've seen throughout the first 4 games of this season. It is no surprise that Duke is willing to take some risks, high risk, high reward in the passing game. And Carolina has shown that they've got, some busts and some liabilities that they've shown in the secondary through the first 4 games. And I think if Duke's going to win, they've got to take advantage of it and force Carolina into some tough positions. And Jordan Moore, being an incredibly talented athlete at wide receiver, has to be the person that leads the way. And then defensively, I think it's a collective effort, Adam, of exactly what we're talking about, and getting penetration, making sure, fundamentally sound, but then tackling low around Hampton. You've got to limit his effectiveness in the game, and then get Criswell into some tough spots where, like we saw last week, he's, apt to throwing it to the other team.